So after the JDBC, to the TLD file. Okay. So JDBC stands for Java Database Connectivity. Java Database Connectivity, that is called the JDBC. So already we think we know about the user interface, how to create the user interface. User interface कैसे हम बनाएंगे वो हमको पता है. यूजर इंटरफेस में हम डेटा देंगे, वो डेटा जाकर हमारा डेटाबेस में स्टोर होगा. तो इस डेटाबेस में डेटा स्टोर होने के लिए हम यूज करेंगे क्या, एक मिडिल टायर आर्किटेक्चर हम यूज करेंगे, वो होता है जेडीबीसी. So consider a scenario where you have to develop an
advanced Java continue sir.
Yeah.
Sir, এটা advanced Java নয় কি?
हाँ, advanced Java तो JDBC नहीं.
Oh, so ठीक है sir.
Consider a scenario where you have to develop an application for an airline company that maintains a record of daily transaction. So you install the SQL server as Jdbc and design the airline database and ask the airline personnel to use it. So first of all, for storing the airline reservation information, we create a user interface where we have to pass the information, and that information must be stored in a database. So when you create a database, so after only creating a database, if you want to store the information in the database, it is not possible to remember the query of the database. So database का query आप याद नहीं रख सकते. The answer will be negative. The task of updating the data in the SQL Server database by using SQL statement alone will be a tedious process. An application will need to develop that the user friendly and provide the option to retrieve, modify the data. तो जो डेटाबेस का जो क्वेरी है वो बहुत बड़ा क्वेरी है. अगर वो क्वेरी हम कुछ लेमैन को देंगे कि तुम इसको लेकर एक क्वेरी को लेकर डेवलप करो और उसको लेकर आप डेटाबेस को रिट्राइव करो, तो वो याद नहीं रख पाएगा वो क्वेरी को. So for that reason, we have to create a mechanism. Through this mechanism, we have to retrieve the data from the database. Okay, so for this reason, we're using JDBC architecture. So Java application cannot communicate directly with the database. So Java application cannot communicate directly with the database to submit the data and retrieve the result of the query. This is because database can interrupt only SQL statement. Database can interrupt only SQL statement, not Java language. So therefore, you need a mechanism to translate the Java statement into the SQL statement. So Java is different, SQL is different. Java program is different and SQL statement is different. If you remember the SQL statement, then through the SQL statement, you cannot store the information. And if you use only Java, so through the Java, you cannot store the information in the database because database query language is different, Java statement is different. Okay, the JDBC architecture has following two layers. One is JDBC application layer. It signifies a Java application that uses the JDBC API to interact with the database. So JDBC architecture contains the two layers. One is JDBC application layer or another is JDBC driver layer. Application layer contains it uses the JDBC API to interact with the JDBC driver. So JDBC driver के साथ interact करने के लिए JDBC application हम use करेंगे. JDBC driver is a software. A driver एक software है. By using of that software, we have to store the information in the database. JDBC driver layer, it acts as an interface between the Java application and database. So it is a middle tier architecture which act as an interface. This layer contains driver such as SQL driver or Oracle driver which enable the connectivity to the database. The driver contain a driver, वो डिफरेंट टाइप का ड्राइवर होता है, तो जो भी डेटाबेस को साथ आप कनेक्ट करना चाहते हो वही ड्राइवर आप यूज करो. एसक्यूएल अगर यूज करना है तो एसक्यूएल ड्राइवर यूज करो, अगर ओरेकल के साथ कनेक्ट करना है ओरेकल ड्राइवर यूज करो. नो, यू हैव टू यूज अ ड्राइवर. Once the request is processed, the database sends the response back to the driver. The response is then translated and sent to the JDBC. The JDBC API finally forward the response to the Java application. तो पहले आप ये रिक्वेस्ट आप भेजोगे, ये रिक्वेस्ट प्रोसेस होगा, जो आप जावा एप्लीकेशन के मदद से आप रिक्वेस्ट भेजोगे, वो डेटाबेस में जाएगा. डेटाबेस में क्या होगा, डेटाबेस तो प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज को वो समझ नहीं पाएगा, तो वहां पर एक ट्रांसलेट होगा, ट्रांसलेट होकर डेटाबेस के पास पहुंचेगा, डेटाबेस से फिर रिट्रांसलेट होकर फिर जावा एप्लीकेशन के पास पहुंचेगा. तो वंस द रिक्वेस्ट इज प्रोसेस, द डेटाबेस सेंड द रिस्पांस बैक टू द ड्राइवर. द रिस्पांस इज देन ट्रांसलेटेड एंड सेंड टू द JDBC API ड्राइवर. द JDBC API फाइनली फॉरवर्ड द रिस्पांस टू द जावा एप्लीकेशन. जो भी रिक्वेस्ट आप भेजोगे, सपोज मुझे मेरा नाम चाहिए, एड्रेस चाहिए, तो मैं उसका रिलेटेड क्वेरी यहाँ पर पास करूंगा और प्रोसेस होकर मुझे इंफॉर्मेशन आपको आज रिस्पांस के हिसाब से आपको पास करके दिखाएगा. इज इट क्लियर? सीताकांत, चंदन, अश्विन. So write this.
Yes,
write this two layer of application. So there are 4 type of driver we are using. One is JDBC ODBC bridge driver, native API driver, network protocol driver, native protocol driver. So 4 type of driver we are using. One is JDBC ODBC bridge driver, native API driver, network protocol driver, native protocol driver. So 4 type of driver we are using. Right? JDBC ODBC bridge driver. The JDBC ODBC bridge driver is called as the type 1 driver. It is called as the type 1 driver. The JDBC ODBC bridge driver convert the JDBC method call to the open database. Just a second. JDBC ODBC driver is called as the type 1 driver. Why it is called as the type 1 driver? ODBC is a open source database. Means you cannot directly connect with the open source database. ODBC is an open standard API which is used to communicate with the database. JDBC ODBC bridge driver, it enables the Java application to use any database that support the ODBC driver. ODBC means open source database. Any application cannot connect to the open source database directly. So that we have to use a middle tier architecture which is helping you to connect the open source database. Okay, so JDBC ODBC bridge driver is acting in that way. It doesn't mean this driver is used. It is not only used for to connect the open source database only, which is freely available. This driver is also applicable any database. Those are support the ODBC. In that cases also you are using JDBC ODBC bridge driver. You not only connect the JDBC, you not only connect the JDBC ODBC driver only open source database, but also you connect all the database. Those are support the JDBC ODBC bridge driver. Okay. So write it. So type 2 driver. For connecting the database, we require some kind of predefined library. Okay, in type 2 driver, you are using CLI, call label interface. Call label interface contain some kind of call label interface contain you can say like some predefined function, and this function is responsible to retrieve the data from the database. This interface consists of the function written in C language to access the database. Type to use the type 2 driver, CLI needs to be loaded on the client computer. Unlike the JDBC ODBC bridge driver, the native API driver doesn't have ODBC intermediate layer. It doesn't have any kind of ODBC intermediate layer. The CLI contains some kind of predefined library. So for using, when you use this library, through that library you can connect with the database. Okay, so right, यहाँ पर हमको कोई मिडिल टायर आर्किटेक्चर का जरूरत नहीं है. यहाँ पर